welcome back to 70s Daydreams. We are continuing with the sci-fi theme, and today we are doing a short film called A Miracle from the Soviet Union, I believe 1973. And this one is very quaint. It's very, very interesting visually, and it has a very simple plot, but with a very strong message.
Yeah, this one's very short too. Easy to follow along, and you can find it on YouTube with English subtitles.
And so basically, it's these two children. I don't know if they are brother and sister, but they are in this really kind of futuristic city with a bunch of like trains and all this fancy technology. And they're running throughout this city trying to get to what they call the miracle. And I don't know who is saying it, the girl or the boy, but they're just like, "Have you seen the miracle? Have you seen the miracle?" And they're taking the train and they're like going up these elevators and they're like going on this long journey to the other side of town to see a miracle. And then they finally get to this little secluded area, and they look down and it's a little plant growing out of asphalt, and they're both looking down at it, and the little plant is the miracle.
Yeah, I thought that was really precious.
It was really precious, and I didn't expect it. When I first watched it, I was sort of like, okay, I'm not really sure what is going on, and then they get to the miracle of like the plant growing out of the asphalt, and it was really, it's such a simple idea, but it's such a strong metaphor because they're in this really futuristic society with all of these machines and technology. But the miracle is that nature was able to survive and grow
in a crack in the sidewalk.
Despite all of these, innovations of technology. And I thought that was really beautiful.
Yeah, and I think that I'm sure you wanted to talk about the sound design in this as well, but almost like when you begin, there's this narrator saying, "Oh, have you seen the miracle? Have you seen the miracle?" I almost felt like there was this ominous feel to it because the music was so kind of like screechy and like jerky and like almost percussive. And so there was like this like build up to this thing. And I was like, oh no, what's it going to be? And then when it was this little birch tree growing out of the crack, I said, oh, it's so precious. Like,
and I think all of the music and sound effects stop once they see the birch tree. Like it all stops, and we just have this moment of reflection and meditation as we watch this beautiful little plant. And I think regarding like the soundtrack, I felt like a lot of those like jerky kind of metallic-y sounds were just sort of like sound effects of the city, like the sounds of the city, sort of like musique concrète. Because like I was like, there is more traditional music. Like, I don't know if it was like Indian sounds, because I heard these type of like almost Indian style drums playing in the background. But a lot of the sounds that we hear seem to be just sort of replicating like the trains or the elevators and all of like the
machinery,
beeps and boops of the. So it was almost seemed like the sound effects and the music were at most equal, if not. I mean, I felt like I noticed the sound effects more than the actual music, but there was still like that kind of like higher pitched like.
Yeah, I guess I was referring to like the sound effects as the music. I guess I was thinking of it as like a soundscape or something like that.
Yeah, it was definitely blurred.
Yeah, and this one had that heavy transportation theme again. Like we've seen a lot of like locomotion, like that sort of thing, progress, futuristic. I mean, obviously we're in sci-fi, so there's going to be a little more of that, but
like forward motion.
And even the kids, it's like they're running towards this destination and they're holding hands at some point, and almost like their faces too, like conveyed to me that maybe we should be nervous about what this miracle is. And there was really no need to be. So I read that this is based on a poem by Roman Sef, S-E-F, pardon me if I'm saying that wrong. And then it was also a sub part of a longer animation called Merry Go Round. and this was the third of four parts. And so the full poem, it's very short, so I'll just read it real quick. It's, "Have you seen a miracle yet? Never seen a miracle? What a pity. Have not seen a miracle? You should go and you should see. You would see a pure miracle, wonderful miracle. By a kitchen store near a building number 3, pushing up through the pavement, there is a little birch tree." So that's the full poem. And then when it's set to the animation, it's changed kind of slightly with the translation and just like beat of it and the words.
But yeah, it seems like more or less like the theme of the poem is kept intact. It's just like the setting of it, into this sci-fi futuristic world. Yeah, that's a pretty poem. And then also the director was
I think it's like Anatoly Petrov.
yes. He's done a lot of Russian, or I guess in this era it would be like Soviet animations. This merry-go-rounds, I think it was like part of like a larger animation series that was done in the Soviet Union, and it was broadcast either in cinemas or on television. I'm not sure, but it seemed like an interesting marriage of modern art with animation.
I read at one point that the director Petrov had a strong focus on realism, and I think was using photography as some kind of like directly using the photography or using that at, like photorealism kind of as a
inspiration for what he's doing,
Mm-hmm.
or like a jumping off point. But this wasn't rotoscoped, was it?
I don't know. It was hard to find information on this other than so that was more of a generality of like what he liked to do was focus on the realism, but it didn't say about this one specifically. So
that like brings us into like the visual style of this short. It's good that you bring that up because while it is an animation, it does have a more real, I don't want to like it's very clearly an animation, and like the colors and everything are very vibrant and vivid, but the forms of all of the characters are pretty realistic, I would say, as opposed to being kind of cartoony, or like all the proportions were more or less
kind of similar to the Levi's commercial almost that we did.
Exactly. Which makes me think it might have been rotoscoped. Just something about the way the bodies all looked and the way they moved. And I thought it was really interesting the way everything was colored, because there were no real like outlines. It was mainly just like these solid colors with like shadows, and it had this really kind of like almost like creepy kind of familiar, like it was almost like uncanny valley.
That's a really good way to describe it. With the soundscape too, like the marrying of those two things was very uncanny valley.
Especially when like at the end when you see the two kids like looking down at the tree. But it's not like there's a lot of detail, but like the forms are detailed enough. Almost like a silhouette.
Like the Levi's commercial. Go and watch that one if you haven't already. No.
And I liked how it was like the little kids who were the ones searching for this miracle, because I guess it speaks to the innocence.
And the hope.
Yeah, whereas all the other adults, I guess they were just like going about their day or going to work. Yeah, the adults were interesting, and given that this is from the 70s, I remember they were like running through some like hallway or something like that, and there's this like woman just like strutting, and she like had these like bell bottoms, and like it was just, yeah, she just was looking so stylish, and it is interesting watching
that side character popping out, and she's just like, notice me.
It's like a very stylish looking piece while also being very much of the time. I think there's a word for that. I don't know if it's retrofuturism, or because like no matter how hard you try to show the future, there's always going to be sort of little tropes of the time that you put in there that you don't even realize you're putting in there. Like when you watch like the original Star Wars and like you see their like 70s haircuts and stuff. It's like, yeah, this is thousands of years in the future, but we all have shag hair.
Yeah,
But
that's
I mean, I love
hilarious.
that type of stuff, you know. I mean, it's nice when things are dated.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about too is like speaking of that those kind of callbacks and such, the poem that this is based upon and then also the animation itself, I was wondering kind of, once we got to the end if it's really a callback to that book A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, like where the tree that grew from the concrete
Yes.
and then I was really interested in that they chose a birch tree in particular because, well, first of all, fun fact, birches and alders are in the same family. So, I consider this a cool little thing. But the tree that grows in Brooklyn, that book was from 1943, and that was a tree of heaven. I believe it was a tree of heaven at least. So that's almost this, what one would call an invasive species growing in Brooklyn, New York. And then this would be a birch, which is a pioneer species. So it's like something that could grow, in very harsh conditions, but it would be like something of the place, which I thought was kind of an interesting little tidbit of information.
Because like the metaphor is already there, but then you have to choose which thing is growing, which plant is growing. Is it going to be, what type of tree, or is it going to be a flower, Isn't there a Maya Angelou poem or book of poetry?
I think you're thinking about Tupac because he has a book,
Tupac?
the Rose That Grew from Concrete.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, many years later.
But just that theme of like, what arises from impossible scenarios and
Against all odds.
and against all odds, and all these things are kind of in conversation with each other in a way. And to me, it's just interesting what plant you choose to kind of grow out. And I think that at least with The Tree Grows in Brooklyn, I didn't read that book, but I think that more speaks to like what they saw, growing out of the concrete, whereas like the others may be more of like a flowery, not being the best word in this scenario, but like embellishment, like something that is not necessarily like a rose growing from concrete, but liking the imagery of that.
Yeah, I mean, there is a really strong and like beautiful image of like a flower, especially like a rose growing out from concrete, because concrete is seen as this really dull, mass-produced, industrialized raw material, and then a rose is, a symbol of love and beauty and extravagance
And like form over function in a way too, like something that's just like beautiful for the sake of being beautiful. And when I think about a birch tree, I think about like their bark and how the bark is kind of peeling off and how that's been used as paper for like many, many years. And then when I think about a birch tree growing out of a piece of concrete, like it's almost like this callback to something that is the opposite of technology, like paper, we're thinking about like books versus Kindles, or obviously that didn't exist here, but just this kind of callback to
like returning to the old ways or tradition, or just like a simpler time. And I'm curious as to like, I mean, I don't know much about the Soviet Union regarding censorship or things like that, but I mean, this seems very much like a critique of hyper industrialization and all of that. It's a very simple message, but I'm wondering how that had an impact on people. I don't know, but we will most likely do some more films by this director. He has another one called Polygon, which is a seminal Soviet sci-fi work. And do you have any other points you'd like to make about this short?
No, just that this one's real accessible to just watch, and I think watch a few times because it's pretty interesting. So give it a watch.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for listening. And it's been about a year since we've started this podcast. I truly am grateful to do this and to do this with you and to be able to connect with people because, like I said in the beginning, I love animation. I love all things, but when you can't share it with people, sometimes it feels like you're just experiencing it in a vacuum. So to watch these unique artworks and then share them with people and talk about them and get other people to watch them, it's really special. So I'm glad we've been able to do this for a year.
I'm really glad about this too. This is just such a labor of love and, really happy that we're doing it too.
Thanks. All right. We'll see you next time on 70s Daydreams.
Bye-bye.
Bye.